Thanks, Marty. Thank you, everyone, for coming at IvyFON. Yeah, okay. So we get the postprandial and prandial slot, which is going to be interesting. So I need you to stay awake. First question I have, and then I'm going to introduce my co-founder partner. My name is Melanie Clarance. Really quickly, background is science and medicine, segue into Swiss banking, and why not investment banking for the mix and VC, and now I've founded a company. So the question I have for you right now is, hands up, who arrived here in an Uber? Nobody arrived in an Uber, one guy did. Thank you very much. And hands up, how many of you have ever pressed the button to order dinner, not from a cardboard box, but on open table? Perfect, or at least make a reservation. And last thing, hands up if you or anyone in your family, perhaps your kids, have ever reserved a place to stay on Airbnb. Okay, take all those elements, and now maybe even if you drive an electric car, anybody here drive an electric car? You've heard of them? Take all of those elements, throw them together. That's our company. So before we create that part of the company, I'm going to tell you how we got here. So I'm going to introduce my partner. I often call him my Asian son, but he's not really. Jerry Lai, and Jerry is my co-founder and CEO of aetherEV. And we're from Canada, so please be kind.
51st state.
Thank you, Melanie. Hi, everyone. My name is Jerry. I am the co-founder and CEO here at aetherEV. A little bit about my background is that formerly investment banker at UBS Hong Kong. Then over the last decade, decided to primarily focus on startups and scale-up companies. Throughout the last decade, had a series of exits, my last one being in the food tech space, which eventually in 2020 was sold to a public company. From there on, was really thinking about hang my hat next. And at the time, I drove one of the first Model S's. And from then on was thinking there has to be a better way for EV charging to occur. Ultimately, Tesla is not the only game in town, and not every automaker is going to bend over backwards and let Tesla eat their cookie, essentially. So I really went out to start looking at who's at the forefront, what's at the technology, what's really at the innovation forefront to really solve this issue. So when I brought my solution to Melanie back in late 22, she said, it's a great idea. Why don't you do it again? You've done it once before, co-founding a company. And I said, look, I'm not going to do it by myself. You're going to have to do it with me. So I pulled her off of her VC gig, and here we are. Founding a company starting in 2023. Just to introduce a bit of our team, not just myself and Melanie, who's our Chief Business Officer. Our COO, his name is Stephen Hitchinson, former head of Tesla Canada. He recently joined us along with our CTO. And he, if you've ever been to Canada, it's a smaller scale of the United States, but he, over the last 8 years at Tesla, built every single supercharger from coast to coast. So from everything from deployments to chargers, he pretty much knows more than anyone in Canada, right? So, and then of course, with our CTO, more infrastructure-based, critical infrastructure, as we are an EV charging company at its heart. That's very important for us to continue to nurture that core of our business. And to Melanie's point, what we're really trying to do is although you might see us as an EV charging company, we're a lot more than that. And for me to walk you through what we're trying to achieve here is really to paint you a picture with what Uber did to the taxi industry. If you can still remember the time before Uber became Uber, we call it the hope and pray model. Before Uber, when you want to haul a cab, you walk down to the street, you hope that there's a cab available, you hope that it would stop for you, and after, if it does stop for you, you pray that the taxi driver knows where he's going, you pray that he's not going to run the meter on you, and you also pray that he has a credit card machine that, and instead of fiddling around with change, that he has a credit card machine to pay for the taxi fare. But ultimately, Uber really revolutionized that. And why I wanted to paint that picture today is because the EV charging industry is very similar to the taxi industry before Uber arrived, where the hope and pray model, meaning that right now, if you're driving an electric vehicle and you're not in a Tesla, you look for a charger on whatever it is that you're searching for, and you hope that it is available. No one's occupying it. You didn't get iced, if you know what that terminology means. And when you get to that station, you hope that it's not broken. And if it's not broken and you're able to back into the stall, you pray that you're able to get a charging session going as seamless as potentially a Tesla supercharger. So what we're really here to try to solve is that entirety of that charging experience, that to make it as seamless as possible, and it should just work if you go into it. With that said, I know that in America, there's a lot of solutions out there compared to a Tesla supercharging network, like your EV Goes, your Electrify Americas. Everyone's talking about this gas station model, where you go out of your way potentially to line up in a long line if it's a supercharger that's frequented in, let's say, in LA. Forgive the fires recently, but that's an example. And you see that on our display right now, there's a map of LA and how Tesla has, I guess, fundamentally changed what the supercharging network was inherently supposed to solve, which was supposed to solve city to city driving, not in-city driving. And I think that's the wrong model, because you always hear on headline news today about the EV charging industry where there's grid constraints. Ultimately, with grid constraints, right, the problem ultimately falls in the level 3 charge, or the fast chargers or the superchargers today, because every site you're looking at 1 megawatt of power, 2 megawatts of power, potentially to power these high power charging stations. But what we're here to trying to tell you is that that's not the right solution, because the best place to charge your car is when you've arrived at your destination, whether that is at home or at your workplace, or if you're shopping, or if you're at a restaurant. Your car is parked. You should be able to charge your car where it's parked instead of going out of your way to find a charging station and take out an hour of your day because your Tesla has Netflix, for example. It's not the best use of your time, and we're really here trying to solve that. So what we're really trying to do is, at the fundamental level, we've already, since inception to date, we've proven out that our hardware and our software combined as a total solution has been as reliable as, at least at the Tesla level, if not more. And what we mean by that is, since inception to date, we've really proven out and proof of concept of our total solutions, meaning that from the deployments of 1 charger, 2 chargers every other day, to now we're getting orders in the hundreds and the hundreds of chargers. And how we were able to achieve that in terms of this first phase of completion of our company is really around aligning ourselves with real estate developers who are our strategic backers from inception to date. So now why we're here today and why we're talking to all of you today is really about what we are here to talk about, which is the fun part, the phase 2 of our growth, and everything about how we will be able to replicate what Uber did to the taxi industry, and for us, Aether, what we're going to do to the EV charging industry in the state of what it is at today. As you can see, the great examples of rideshare, travel, Airbnb, everything has been revolutionized, but I can confidently say that there is no single solution that's able to transform and disrupt the EV charging industry like what we're about to show you today. So ultimately, what this all comes down to, and why we call this the fun part, is really to set the foundation for what we call everything software. From our back end, where the intelligence happens, it's really to curate that experience into an app form. Right now, we do have our app 1.0 that's currently available to download on your smartphone. But what that entails is more of a utility-based app. You use it, you can interact with our charger, away you go, that's it. What we want to revolutionize is changing that to a more experienced approach on our app platform. And how we are able to do that is really through the work that we've already been putting in in order to allow a lot of these features to happen. And one of the things that came out from it is that a lot of our hardware and our solution, our technology is really about now, how do we in real time detect whether there is a vehicle present in the parking stall or not? It's very binary, but the complexities behind, happy to share with you how that happens. Ultimately, what that entails, if you can see how is that very powerful, is that all of a sudden we're no longer considered just an EV charging company. All of a sudden, in real time, we're able to tell across all of our chargers in those particular parking stalls where there is vacancy in parking and where there is not vacancy in the parking in real time. As you can see, all of a sudden, our company from an EV charging company becomes a real-time data collection company, knowing where the best parking spots are available, when they're not, and we can start getting very fancy with either the data or start capturing fees like parking, for example. I always see parking as a very old school, old days type of industry, but every family office and every private equity loves to invest in these hard assets because it's a cash cow. It consistently generates X amount of dollars per year, but yet no one knows how to actually operate them in a very historic model. What we're here to trying to do is bring that to present day, which is what we call parking as a service. Ultimately, using our charger to, in real time, detect and notify when parking spots are available, whether you are an EV or not. You could interact with our technology, essentially operating as a parking meter, for example. If you can ever imagine a time where you roll into a parkade, not a gated one, because a gated one means you get a tag and you go in and they know when you've arrived at the parking lot, but those ungated lots where you parked your car and you're looking for that parking meter. You either parked on the wrong side of the corridor or it's right at the P1 and you parked at P4. And that wasting of time is what we're trying to solve, where through the app or just simply driving in and leaving your car, the payment, and we would be able to, in real time, know who's parked in that stall, who you are, and be able to accurately generate that kind of positive cash flow that would be typically missing and all put onto enforcement in parking, where if someone doesn't pay for parking, then you get into this nuance of trying to enforce that parking. So we're trying to solve all that through EV technology and EV charging technology, combining into something much more fresh. Also, with our technology and what we're trying to build on as everything software, as Melanie has already mentioned, how are we doing the Airbnb model of charging? And essentially what we're trying to achieve is if you have a home charger, especially here in San Francisco or you're in LA, real estate is expensive. And yet if you have a parking spot and a charger, what you can essentially do on our software and on our platform is essentially list that parking stall or list that charger for days that you're not going to be using. For example, if you're here and you live in LA and you're here for JP Morgan or you're here for IvyFON, your parking stall could be vacant at the time. You could essentially list it on our app and we will facilitate all that back-end transactions, similar to how Airbnb does it. And all you need to know is that you'll get a check at the end of the month for that parking and for that charging. And we can handle all of that for you as all through our app.
The important part just to mention here is that these ideas that we're discussing with you are actually the brainchild of Steve Hitchinson, our COO. So he had 8 years as the #1 hire in Canada for Tesla. Remember, he put 5,000 chargers from Victoria to Prince Edward Island, and I can assure you it's a very long distance. And he had 8 years to have these ideas marinate in his head. Where are the pain points for EV driving? If you own an EV, you've had some of these pain points. You've had to pay what I call for charging. You've had to pay for parking. You've had to pay for charging. You probably haven't thought Airbnb model. You could have rent out the charger on your driveway and be earning income.
Absolutely. And these are just some of the other features that we're also working on through everything we just talked about. Please go ahead, Marion.
Question. How are you thinking about in densities like San Francisco, which have really archaic infrastructure versus somewhere like San Mateo, or just at the same time? I know people that have electric cars here that have a problem with trying to charge in the city. So I'm just curious how you feel about that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it's really about, of course, depending on every site's going to be different in terms of the electrical capacity and the electrical grid. And what we have is not just at the charger level where it's intelligently able to, call it smart scheduling, call it off-peak charging, et cetera, that we already have those functionalities for. But on top of that is we're able to pull data through one of our, back-end devices to be able to pull in real time the baseload power that's coming in through that particular segment. And what that means is that our charges would dynamically be able to balance with the power that it's being pulled. Let's say, for example, this building here, down in the parkade, it runs its own kind of electrical feed and its own power shared amongst this entire building and all the lights and all the heat pumps, et cetera, et cetera. But there are times during the day where how people use electricity is really on the peak to off-peak channels. So for us is having that device to be able to intelligently load balance with the existing infrastructure that's currently in place today allows us to dynamically adjust the rate of charge that goes into the charger as it is. Assuming that there's going to be a mass for us to massively deploy level 2 chargers, the rate of which that you'll be able to charge is going to be a lot slower than a fast charger typically. But if you're there for an hour to 2 hours, or if you're parked overnight for over 8 hours, a trickle charge or a slow charge is more than capable of being able to charge up your daily drive, no problem. We're not trying to solve for the city to city driving because there are bigger boys that are playing in that space. The EV Goes, the Electrify Americas, the Tesla superchargers. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so my son is actually shortcutted everything. So he lives in the city over here, with his wife. So Sunday I'm getting ready to come to the JP Morgan conference, and all of a sudden I notice he pulls up to my garage and backs his high-end Tesla there. Suddenly he's charging it. I eliminated the first one. And then he comes into the house. He says, "Dad, you know how to operate the espresso machine?" I said, "Yeah." You got that frother, the new frother?
Hello.
Suddenly he's got a cappuccino, And then all of a sudden he says, "Dad, is there any leftover food for me?" So all of a sudden he's solved all the problems.
Does he need a job?
So, but I didn't charge him anything. So happy to see the city and
Of course.
see the guy. But yeah, that's one way to. I still have my Canadian accent.
If you think about the first time you've ever used Uber, I'm going to say from a female standpoint, when my kids told me, I thought, well, what is this? And I downloaded, get in the Uber and like, oh, the car's clean. Oh, nobody's smoking. Oh, but the big one for at least, I'm just from my perspective, my purse is usually who knows what's in there. And I've grabbed my wallet before, pulled it out unknowingly. My passport went flying out onto the seat, remained in the cab in London. And that credit card experience, and you're trying to get out of the taxi, and it's just not good. So we're trying to make this as future proofing as we can. I just wanted to answer Maureen's question too, is we are really not an EV charging company. We're really a data company masquerading as an EV charging company. It all comes down to data, and we're working with a lot of major real estate developers in Canada, some of whom are building in California, who then have turned around unsolicited and asked if they could invest in us. So we're doing something right because all our investors are either ourselves, bootstrapped it, or they are strategic.
Maybe a follow-up question.
Well, we are in the US dollar, so that's one good protection.
I think the barrier to entry is really, I think it's twofold. Number one is the rate of EV adoption, right? Because our trend line does follow the rate of EV adoption.
And what is that, right?
Right now, I believe West Coast is completely different from the rest of.
Just wondering.
Yeah, it's about 20%.
Okay.
New car sales is about 20%. I believe in California as well as BC. Oregon, Washington follow suit but the numbers do show it's about 20% new EV adoption rates.
According to Trek, just came out yesterday, the whole world adoption of EVs has gone through the roof, with the exception of Germany. And with the exception, the one that slowed down the statistics, surprisingly, is Tesla, because of the stale models and because of, unfortunately, just what's happening in Washington right now.
So this platform will be rolled out worldwide?
Yes, it'll be worldwide. This is critical that you said that. So even though we have hardware and our own software, which quote unquote, according to our CEO, is better than Tesla's, our backend software is better than Tesla's, because Tesla doesn't need to have backend software because they are owner operators. We sell ours mostly. We will be working with any chargers through this app, charger agnostic, as long as they're on the open charge point protocol network.
There's about 2 minutes left.
So ultimately, as we talked about, a lot of our sales velocity today is working with a lot of the major real estate developers that either need or seeing consumer demand, pushing for electric chargers or EV chargers in their parkades that they're building. So a lot of our kind of in the hundreds of deployments are really around how do we solve their biggest pain point, which is the city is mandating them to roll in EV chargers and they don't know how to do it. So we essentially became a lot of our strategic investors' internal EV charging department.
Is there a revenue share with your real estate partners?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Everything, sorry, go ahead.
Is there any opportunities on advantages?
Yeah. So I think for us, because how we built our platform, we share our revenues, right? That the recurring revenues with most of our stakeholders. So particularly, let's say with the strata or HOA, they get a piece of it, right? The utilities get their share, the HOAs or the stratas get their share. If the real estate developer, I mean, depending on the real estate developer, if they're own and operate, or when I say own and operate, meaning IPP, or if they have a huge income producing portfolio, for example, that's a different model altogether. But ultimately for us, it's really about sharing that. Please go ahead.
How do you monetize the data that you're collecting?
Yeah, so there's twofold to how we monetize that data. So for us, one of the ways is working with the automakers. So we start to collect the data, whether it's energy or the electrons being flowed in real time in 1,000 percentiles, so that we know accurately how much electrons are being delivered at any given point. Once we start implementing this new parking as a service model, we are able to create a driver profile for every single one of our accounts that are on our network moving forward. What that means for the automaker is that we can start to do very fancy math with the data that we're collecting. A, we know the degradation of the battery and when that model needs to be refreshed. B, where the traffic is going mostly and how that user is driving their car and where they're parking it. So that's one way. And the second way, of course, is infrastructure and utilities. What a beautiful way for a utility to know is that when we can produce them a heat map of every month of where charging is most desired and how they can project what their power needs are in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months down the line. So those are the two ways.
Fantastic. Great. Well, thanks so much.